At this point, the wing was now ready for the flap linkage. As you can see, it's a simple affair with a piece of music wire extending from the servo arm down to a ball link. The brass ball and the ball link was soldered to the crossing music wire, which was then inserted into the left and right torque rods for the flaps. My reasoning for soldering the brass ball to the crossing music wire was to prevent the ball link from moving along that wire as the servo moved the flaps. The most important thing with soldering is cleanliness. The first thing I do is thoroughly sand the music wire with the 150 grit sanding pad. The next thing I do to remove any residue and any oils from handling the music wire is to wipe it down with 95% alcohol. The first time I tried soldering the brass ball was with the ball in place on the music wire, but that did not work so well. And then I finally got smart and pre-tinned the music wire and allowed capillary action to allow the solder to flow into the brass ball. I did get a little excess solder on the brass ball, and that needed to be filed down so the ball would fit well in its housing. So I have the test linkage set up. I have it just going through a quick connector. I'm not going to use that. It's just there for test purposes. The flaps, they seem to move well. They move in unison. Now, nothing is glued in place, so these things might move a little bit. But, for test purposes, they actually work pretty well. So I got some 3mm balsa. The bearing is 3mm, and I'm just going to capture the bearing like this. Next thing I want to do is lay up some covers for the servo hatch. Instead of using the clear packing tape this time, I'm going to use the clear monocoat since it's a little wider area. Now I think what I've marked out here, I think this is about the area where the servo mount is. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm going to start in this area. So I'm just going to make the fiberglass piece a little bit oversized. For the fiberglass, I'm going to be using some of this Bondo fiberglass cloth. I think it's really intended for auto and marine applications. It's a little bit heavy. I'm not sure the exact weight of it. I measured it, weighed it with my gram scale, and it says it's 8 square feet. And if I did the math right, it comes out to about 6 ounces per square yard. It's pretty heavy. So I'll be using 2 layers of that and then 1 layer of 3/4 ounce for the easy finishing. What I've done, those other marks that you saw on the wood, I have now transferred to the clear monocoat, and then this will transfer to the resin and the fiberglass, and it should help me kind of match things up, kind of like reference marks. After the first piece of fiberglass is down with resin, I lay the second piece of fiberglass on top and use a playing card and a stiffer piece of plastic card to pull any excess resin up through to the second layer before adding any additional resin. This helps to keep the part as light as possible. This way really minimizes the amount of additional resin required to wet out the cloth. The same goes for each additional layer of fiberglass added. As a final measure to keep the weight down, I blot out the excess resin. Cheap, coarse toilet paper seems to work best to pick up the excess resin. The cheaper, the better. But I ran out, so I'm using coarse paper towel instead. I chose not to use peel ply on these small patches. Instead, I'll just put a flow coat on it. So a little light sanding with some 150 grit prior to the flow coat. Working on control horns, there is a pattern for control horn that the plans give for the aileron. And I haven't looked, but I'm assuming it's the same for the rudder and elevator. So what I've done is I'm using G10. It's 62,007-inch D10, and I've cut 4 of them and ganged them together, glued them together. I used silicone, it's called silicone liquid adhesive. Basically, I guess a silicone glue. Works pretty good. It holds the G10 together, and it's actually a little bit easy to take it apart after I've already shaped the pieces. So you can see the silicone releases pretty easily. It does leave a little bit of a residue, but I sand these down anyway to accept paint. They're pretty smooth. So I usually sand them with some 150 grit. In the next update, I'll show you the construction of the tail feathers.